You are listening to Conversations on the Way. I'm your host, Nana Jumphy, and I'm looking forward to sharing conversations at the various intersections of liberation for the people and the planet with you. Thank you for being here with us. Today's conversation is at the intersection of unforgivable Blackness and decisions to be made. They're talking about caging Haitians at Guantanamo Bay. Again, Haiti and the Haitian people continue to be punished, sanctioned, and criminalized for what the great Frederick Douglass called their and her unforgivable Blackness. Their daring to be free from the shackles of slavery, colonialism, and Western imperialism has caused their country to be deep seated in chaos and conflict. Current conditions in the country, whose roots and many branches stem from the policies of the US, France, and Canada, are dire. These conditions have had a profound historic impact on Haitians coming to and living in the United States. I'm glad to be digging deeper into this topic with my esteemed guest and comrade, Ninaj Raoul. Ninaj Raoul is a co founder and executive director at Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees in New York, an organization founded in 1992 to respond to the human needs of Haitian refugees and immigrants in the United States fleeing persecution through education, community organizing, leadership development, collective action, litigation, and participatory action research. She works with HWHR members to empower themselves as they struggle for social, economic, and racial justice. Over the years, HWHR has conducted leadership and ongoing organizing trainings for adult literacy learners and developed brave, culturally grounded healing spaces to engage in survivor informed practices to face trauma and daily challenges. Her current work with HWHR involves local organizing and advocacy efforts for refugees, asylum seekers, undocumented folks, youth immigrants, TPS holders, and survivors of violence to build power and resistance as part of a larger liberation movement. Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees was a plaintiff in the NAACP LDF lawsuit against the United States Department of Homeland Security for its decision to rescind the temporary protective status, or TPS, for Haitian immigrants. Greetings, Ninaj. So great to be speaking with you today.
Hi, Nana. Thanks for having me on today.
I know that it's a really difficult time, that there's a lot happening. And, again, I really appreciate you taking the time to be on. I'm looking generally at what's happening in this immigration space in terms of US policy, looking as we, usually do at the impact of Black migrants. And there always seems like a special place for the United States when it's talking about immigration policy and talking about Haitians in particular. And, I just was horrified. I mean, it's just, I don't understand it, but yeah, I just was horrified to see once again the words Guantanamo Bay coming up in the context of answering the question what to do about Haitians who are migrating to the United States. And that immediately made me think of you. I knew that I had to get with you because of the history that you have in this work going back to the 90s and Haitians of Guantanamo Bay that I think a lot of people don't know about. So just wanted to start with that question. Like, I hope folks to understand what Guantanamo Bay means when you hear it with respect to Haitian migrants.
Before I get into Guantanamo, I just want to touch on how you opened up with special place, um, because that's how I describe it. And I think just to even frame everything, I think it's important for people to understand that this special treatment, I always call it special treatment, that they have for Haitian refugees every time, I believe, and many Haitians believe, really just dates back to the beginning of the existence of Haiti because of the simple fact that Africans freed themselves from the colonists, and when there was still slavery over here in the United States. And so naturally, the colonists over here didn't want the slaves here to know that this had happened. They didn't want the word to get out. So there was just a lot of erasure and not recognizing the existence of Haiti for decades, after Haiti became independent in 1804. So I just think the same way that a lot of us inherit the courage of our ancestors to continue to be in struggle. It's the same way that, a lot of white people inherit the evilness of treatment that they do from their ancestors. And so I think our trauma, their trauma, it's still slavery. It's a legacy of slavery. And I think that really has a lot to do with the special treatment that Haitians get in this country. There's a long legacy of racism against Haitians, but that's where it starts, basically. So in 1991, there was the first democratically elected president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, in Haiti. And actually, the election happened in 1990, December 16th, 1990. He took office February 7th, 1991. And he was only in office for he had 67% vote. And he came into the election at the very last minute. And he was only in office for 7 months. And when he was overthrown by a military coup, which was backed by the US, a lot of his supporters were killed immediately, and they just came after them. And that's when a lot of people had to leave Haiti. The military had control of the airports and the borders, so a lot of people ended up leaving by boat. And they were interdicted by US Coast Guards and Coast Guard cutters and taken to Guantanamo, where they set up a screening refugee camp, what I call a concentration camp, where they were giving credible fear interviews, much like the interviews that they're supposed to be giving at the US-Mexico border today. So I ended up going down there to work as what they call a linguist specialist, which is basically an interpreter, translating for between the refugees and the asylum officers for these credible fear interviews. And I sat through about 400 or 500 interviews. And that was in January of 1992. And I met Marie Seurat, who is our co-founder in Guantanamo, who was also there translating the credible fear interviews. And she was from Brooklyn. And when we met so many refugees that were coming back this way, we handed our numbers to them and said, let us know. Some people were coming from very remote areas in Haiti. Some had never even been to Port-au-Prince. So I couldn't imagine them coming to New York. And so, and we handed out our numbers and said, let us know if you need anything, when you get there, if you have any questions. And we started getting flooded with calls when we got back. And I came back in March. I was there for 2 months. The first time I went to Guantanamo. I ended up going there a total of 5 times, but that was the first time. And that was we were literally working for the Justice Department at the time. There was no Homeland Security. There was no USCIS. It was INS, Immigration and Naturalization Service. So then they basically screened them and forcibly repatriated about 75% of the folks. There was about 40,000 people that came through Guantanamo between October of 1991 to June of 1992. That's when they had closed it. And so they forcibly repatriated 3/4 of them, and then about 25%, roughly between 10 and 11,000, came into the United States. And of those 10 or 11,000, was a small percentage, closer to 1%, that were found to be HIV positive. They gave them health screenings before they came in. The 10 to 11,000 that did come in came in on humanitarian parole, much like the humanitarian parole that's being granted at the border today. And the humanitarian parole could have ranged anywhere from 30 days to, they was usually 1 year was the maximum. And so they would come in and be resettled through either a couple of resettlement agencies, either Church World Service or Catholic Charities. And then some of them would go to their family homes, and some were resettled in odd places. I ended up returning that year because the press could not get out there. They had separated out the HIV positive folks. They had separated out people with malaria, and they separated out folks that tested positive for TB and put them all in one camp called Camp Buckley. So that right there is a health hazard. Take HIV positive people and put them together with folks with malaria and TB. And so I had gone, before I had left the first time, I had volunteered to go to that camp to interpret, because they were going to give them their well-founded fear interviews. They were going to give them a second interview to decide whether or not they should be allowed to continue to the States. So at the time, there was an HIV exclusion ban. And so if you were found to be HIV positive, you weren't supposed to be able to come into the country. That was not lifted until, I think it was one of the first executive orders that Obama did when he became president in 2008. So then I went back later that year because a group of journalists sued. They weren't allowed to come out to Guantanamo when they were keeping the HIV positive. They kept them for an extensive period of time. Some people were there for an entire 18 months. I should tell you there was about 168 people found to be HIV positive out of the 11,000 folks. And then some of them had family members with them. So there was a total of 200 and something, 260 something Haitian refugees being kept in Camp Buckley in Guantanamo, and they were being guarded by 300 Marines. Yeah, so this was supposed to be a humanitarian mission.
That is wild.
Yeah, so they would have actions. They would have direct actions. They had hunger strikes, anything to make their voices be heard. I started going back there with some folks from from Yale Law School, the Lowenstein Human Rights Clinic, just as a volunteer, interpreting because there was a lawsuit. There was some litigation that was filed against the government for not letting them in. And so I ended up going back there several times to work with the refugees and the lawyers on that lawsuit.
Let me ask you this. First of all, there's so much. I thought I knew a lot about what had happened and then, and there's some pieces that you're telling me now. Like I didn't realize there were people that were there for 18 months. You described the unforgivable Blackness as our leader and teacher, Frederick Douglass, that described the sentiment of the United States towards Haiti. But you also described the space in Guantanamo Bay as a concentration camp. And you've talked about, Camp Buckley some in terms of just the fact that you had folks that shouldn't be together being stuck in a space together. And also this sort of indefinite detention, basically, that they were subjected to. But when you say concentration camp, just so people can have a sense in their brain, what makes that description come to mind when you think about the conditions that people were in?
It was so much the mistreatment. It was one thing, whenever they were the organized direct actions for their voices to be heard, that was meant by, and they sent letters. They sent letters out to the press. They sent letters to legislators over here. But when they had like hunger strikes and marches, it was met with violence from the Marines. Punishing people, putting the organizers of these actions into 4-foot square cages. Yeah, they would take them to the brig. So it's like you're already in jail behind barbed wire, and now you're already being detained, and now there's a jail within the jail. So if you're organizing these direct actions, you're going to be punished. and they would put people in the brig for that. And as I told you, they were like these literally 4 foot square boxes that they would put them in. And then, this would happen often, like whenever they had these actions. I remember going there once in particular. I remember it was, it was in March of 1993 with another member from Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees and one lawyer. It was just the three of us because people were rotating. The lawyers would rotate and our teams would rotate as well. And they had just been awakened in the middle of the night for like a head count, and they ended up when I entered, I found 31 people with their ankles cuffed and their wrist cuffs. They ended up arresting 13 people that night, including including a 1.5-year-old baby girl that literally got thrown into the back of this I don't know if it was a van or something that they were taking them to the brig. I remember,
Really?
yeah, I remember there was also a 7-year-old boy amongst them, and then there was one guy in particular who had his ankles tied, those plastic ties, and he broke the fall. He lifted his legs to break the fall of the 1.5-year-old when they threw her in there. This was really disturbing. The people that I found that were there, not the ones that were arrested because they were in the brig, we started talking to them and giving them water. They had them sitting in the sun, the hot sun. There were no trees around, so it's just sun. And yeah, it was very disturbing. There was one particular man that later would end up in Brooklyn, and in we used to have ESL classes, but he was very ill. He had a fever. I spoke to the military and say, "Come on, you can clearly see that he's sick. Take off his things." They just said we can loosen him up, but they didn't take off the shackles. So it was, they were like vaginal searches, really horrible stuff. Putting the guys on the ground and they would like pinch them in this nerve area in their shoulder. A lot of physical mistreatment, for punishing them for having these direct actions. This is the Marines. They prize themselves with being trained to kill. They're not trained for humanitarian missions. So, and they called us a humanitarian mission, but this was, like I said, they were outnumbered by 300 Marines, and they were there just waiting to apply for asylum.
And I'm almost speechless. Especially when we think about it in the context that this is supposed to be humanitarian. I mean, these are folks who are seeking safety, and you described earlier people who literally were on the run, right? And because of the military being in control of the airports, etc., had to find other ways to make it. I often mention that if this was a video game or if this was a movie, right, people root for the people who are trying to get away, right? We root for the people who are trying to make it to this other world. Maybe this is why most of these movies don't have Black people as the protagonists that are trying to get away, because apparently we don't root for Black people trying to get away,
Right? They
right?
were
And
fleeing
particularly
persecution.
Black people from Haiti.
Yeah, much like the folks today, they were fleeing persecution, and this is, they were organizers. They were. It was a pretty young population. ISTED supporters were young. They had a lot of neighborhood committees, and they were organizers. Some of them were students, some of them were community organizers. So it was natural that they were having these direct actions when they were in Guantanamo. They were very political people, and they loved their country, but they were forced to flee the persecution.
It's, again, bringing it to today, because we find that Haiti is again in a condition in which people are being forced to flee. We find again that instead of the United States sort of honoring its position and what it talks about in terms of who it is, with respect to, accepting folks who are in need of safety, that Haitians again are being targeted, and it's why Guantanamo's come up in so many other ways. Really just not getting the relief that they should be getting. I mean, I think about all the programs that were created for Ukraine. It was for Ukrainians fleeing danger. It was all laid out: refugee status, TPS, stop deporting folks. Anything that you could get, they were getting it, right? Asylum, like all of the potential categories they were being able to check off the box. And, we don't see that with Haitians, even with the so-called parole program that they've set up now. Can you talk about that? Like, the impact, maybe a couple of things about the impact that the conditions are having that are causing people to flee, and then what Haitians are able to really access, if anything, if they're able to make it out.
Yeah, so when people come in, normally they would get, most of the Haitians that we work with use that CBP1 app at the border or near the border, and they come in through an appointment, and most of them are granted humanitarian parole for um, nowadays 2 years, but up until May of last year, it was up to 1 year. And it's random. Some people get detained, some people were getting deported. It was really random. Families were being separated. Families are still being separated. But with humanitarian parole, you're supposed to, one of the important benefits is you're supposed to be able to apply for employment authorization. And that's what people want. They want to be able to work and support themselves and support their families. And we experience, a lot of disparities on how Haitians were being treated compared to other folks. For example, the Ukrainians. Everything was opened up for Ukraine, and United for Ukraine special programs. And so with the Haitian folks, it was taking like anywhere from 8 to 11 months for them to get their employment authorization when they were coming in with 1 year parole. So by the time you get to your destination and you're able to find, get a lawyer, where there's a shortage of lawyers, as we know, especially after the pandemic, you're a few months in many cases. And so a lot of times the lawyers wouldn't even apply for the employment authorization for them because they knew that it was taking 8 to 11 months, and they're seeing somebody 3 or 4 months after coming in. So they didn't want to have people spend their money or go through the process and the waiver process and then not get the employment authorization. Whereas we learned by talking to the lawyers that worked with some of the Ukrainian population that at the time they were getting their employment authorization within 6 to 8 weeks from the day that they applied for it, getting it in hand within 6 to 8 weeks. So, and their waiver process was so much easier. All they had to do was put 3 words on there, coming from war-torn country, and that was it. Whereas the Haitians had to go and apply for Medicaid to qualify, to show that they can qualify for some kind of government benefit so that they would be considered low income. And they couldn't just say, I would ask the government, what is the 3 magic words for the Haitians to get these waivers, And so we ended up having to do a participatory action research project, which led to a report to document this, because when we have these engagement meetings with the government, they would deny, oh no, everyone should be treated the same. And we were like, clearly they're not. We're documenting it. We're going to have a report soon. We'll get it to you. And indeed, you had to spend money to state the obvious, to prove what the obvious, because we were seeing it happen. So that report came out in just last November of 2023. 3 days later, there's a group of Haitian refugees that sued the government in Indiana, in Indianapolis, because they were not allowed to apply for driver's license, where the Ukrainians with the humanitarian parole were getting driver's license with the same humanitarian parole. They won a preliminary injunction, and now they're able to. So it's good that these things are always being met with resistance from the Haitian people and have been so historically, but it doesn't stop, especially in an election year.
It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. We're trying to stop them, Ninaj. We are. Our people are trying to stop them. But yes, that resistance continues. And that Indiana case was so great also because people pigeonhole communities and people are not clear. Haitians are everywhere. There is no state that does not have Haitians. I think 2 years ago there was some hurricane tornado in Iowa, and Baji had provided some support to some Haitians there. And I didn't know there were Haitians in Iowa. but they're
Yeah.
everywhere. And you're right, everywhere, resisting, everywhere, stepping up, everywhere, demanding, doing that dual thing, demanding of government while we also try to handle our own business, right? But not
Right.
letting our foot off the pedal in terms of demanding of government what government is supposed to do and what we are entitled to. It's not even a dessert. It's like we're entitled to these benefits in equitable ways, in equitable ways.
Right. And the reason that they end up in places like Iowa and Indiana, Ohio, everywhere that they are, is because they weren't getting those employment authorization and they were forced to work jobs that are basically under the table that don't have worker protections to survive.
And to expect people to be able to do that and pay these rents in these other places, right? Even if you have 4 or 5 people, you still are not going to be able to make it. And so,
Right.
yeah, you got to go places where the cost of living is such that working under the table with other folks, working with, together, combining your funds, you're going to be able to live, in a dignified way. We're almost out of time. I do want to ask one more question and then, find out how folks can help. What is the most urgent things right now that are on deck? I know we're looking at this Guantanamo situation, trying to make sure that doesn't happen, trying to deal with this, the employment authorizations and making that a faster process. What else, if anything else, is urgent that people need to be supporting and pushing for on behalf of Haitian migrants?
Yeah, with the Guantanamo, we want to make sure that doesn't happen, especially because Guantanamo is a land that the US military is not even supposed to be on. They were supposed to giving it back to Cuba many years ago, so they're there illegally. But it's a lawless place. So that's why they were able to do what they want. That's why they took after 9/11, they took a lot of those South Asians and Middle Easterns there when they wanted to torture people. So that's a problem. That's a biggest problem with Guantanamo, as they tortured the Haitians before. But when people come in and land in whatever towns that they land, and whether it's with family or whether they're being bused from Texas by the governor of Texas, and ending up homeless in these cities such as New York, Boston, Chicago, and in Colorado as well. They're in need of legal services and quality legal services, and I say quality legal services because there's all these, quick setups where you can apply for asylum for 2 hours, that some of these cities are doing, and that just doesn't do it for asylum because Haitians have the lowest rate of asylum acceptance historically in this country. When I started this work in the early 90s, we looked at the statistics between 1980 and 1990, and Haitians were granted asylum less than 2% of the time. I know you probably saw the scene where they had the whole at the California um, Mexico border in Tijuana, where the Chinese folks are coming in. Last year, the Chinese folks, the grant asylum rate was 55%. And they're coming through this hole and coming straight from the airport and coming in, and they know they're going to apply for asylum. And they know, they're going to get a different treatment. So we definitely need more legal representation, therapists, and psychotherapists, because obviously our folks have gone through layers of trauma, especially folks that are taking the long routes from South and Central America. And nowadays, folks that are coming from Haiti, they're losing family members and they're going through a lot of, we have at Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees, we hold healing justice spaces that are like trauma-informed healing justice spaces that are transformative justice spaces and where people take charge of their own. It's we encourage people to self-advocate and try to give them the tools to do that. So we've seen great things happen in those spaces. And that's how we were able to get folks to participate in participatory action research. And so those are language justice support, where people have to be linguistically competent, especially when you're talking about gender-based violence. You want, you also want gender competent folks too, because we have a problem. I don't know about the rest of the country, but in New York City, it's mostly male interpreters, and you have women that are survivors of gender-based violence or domestic violence, and when they call the hotline, they get a male interpreter. So that's one of the things
That's
we
true.
also advocate. It's ridiculous.
That's true. It is ridiculous, and it's very true. Yep, yep. What
Yeah, so
else? I know there's
that's the
more.
effort that we're doing at Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees. We staff, our staff includes a lot of directly impacted folks. So, it's a trusting environment for when folks first come and they find somebody who's gone through what they've gone through. So, we're just working hard to, especially in this year, to advocate for redesignation of TPS, because even with that Biden parole program that they try to deter people from the border, it's as long as they don't you don't deal with the root causes, which roots back to Washington D.C. Um, Folks are going to have to move to survive. They're going to have to migrate to survive. And so the reason that Haiti is the way it is today has a lot to do with the history of occupations, interventions, which continue. Now they're trying to get folks from Kenya and Benin, but it's the U.S. is always behind it. These UN forces that come in and destabilizing our governments as they do many other governments in Central America and around the world. Those are the root causes. Crop dumping, and they're extracting minerals from Haiti. All those things are going on still now. And these are a lot of the reasons why people end up having to leave. The gang violence, we don't make guns in Haiti. There are no gun factories or bullet factories in Haiti. They are coming from here. So, these gangs are being propped up by ammunition that's coming straight from here.
And probably business interests too, but that's another show, right? Because we
Absolutely.
can know exactly. I'm in LA, Los Angeles. We know that gangs are not just about people who are wilding out and just want to be violent, that there are so many other things that are connected
Yeah,
that doesn't get talked about. And the image of the Haitian with the weapon, the dark skinned Haitian with the weapon in their mouth open wide is like the image that is perpetually portrayed
right.
as one to show that Haiti's DNA is corrupt, is violent, is right. And so the issue is the root cause is something wrong with Haiti, as opposed to what you've clearly indicated. The root cause is the US, the root cause is Canada and France, the root cause is these multinational corporations. And to some degree, now we see the root, complicity by the global south, whether it be Brazil when it was leading the UN peace, whether it be Kenya and Benin, Catacomb, right? They're looking for ways to pull us into their foolishness,
Right.
and give a black face to that evil that you described at the top of the show. That's really
Exactly.
coming from these white colonial spaces.
Yeah, it's all coming from Washington, D.C., no matter what face they're trying to put on.
How do folks support Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees and the really critical, important, brilliant, deep, broad work that you do on behalf of not just Haitian refugees, though that's the focus, but all of our folks that are out here, Black migrants, trying to make sure that we are able to live dignified lives?
Yeah, so you can visit our website at HaitianRefugees.org. If people want to support, there are many ways to support. We besides monetary, we have a really small staff, but as I said, we always make sure to try to staff with folks that are directly impacted. And but it's a small but really bold and strong organization, and growing a bit, but there's a lot of people coming in, so it's a challenge. But also, support our campaign to redesignate TPS, because that's something that we're going to need immediately, not just this year, but next year too, because the folks that are coming in with the 2-year paroles, it's going to expire. And that's the one thing about that parole program, is there's like no other future. Just say you're here for 2 years and nothing happens after that. So if you didn't apply for asylum, then you end up out of status. So that's why we're pushing hard for, I've never been a fan of pushing for temporary status, but it's something that's necessary right now, because at least it will allow people to work and support themselves while they just try to navigate this complicated immigration system.
Thank you again so very much, Ninaj, for sharing your experience, your knowledge, your analysis with us. We really appreciate that. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Nana.
That was Ninaj Raoul, Executive Director of Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees. If you've missed any part of this hour, from 10 this morning for 90 days after that, just go to kpfk.org, scroll down to archives, and click on Conversations on the Way. You'll be able to listen to our show in its entirety. Follow me at Attorney Nana on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to my YouTube channel for this and other interviews.